In order to explore the mystery of death, 5 college students decided to conduct a crazy experiment. They lie in the ruined church and turn and enter a state of death. After enough time in the yin and yang realm, other guardians will save themselves. The first experiment is the planner of this plan, Huang Mao. His challenge time is 1 minute. Under the impact of his companion, his heart stopped beating quickly. Consciousness also entered a magical space at random. At first, it was a scene as warm as jade and as like heaven. The children screaming like a ghost is enviable, but then it suddenly changed. The sky suddenly darkened, as if the Tazu were cultivating. Huang Mao's last memory stayed on a child's face. At this time, the time was up. Huang Mao pulled him back from the yin and yang realm after being reborn. Huang Mao did not have any abnormalities at first. Instead, all kinds of senses became more sensitive and sensitive. You can even hear the movement of insects 100 meters away. But when he was in this wonderful state, a crawling puppy suddenly appeared at the end of his sight. This puppy also appeared in his memory of death. It's just that the state is 2 extremes. But this strange state didn't disappear for long. So Huang Mao didn't pay much attention, and his companions saw that Huang Mao was unharmed. After experiencing a unique death experience, they couldn't wait to join the death experiment. The second one to appear was Zhugan, and his challenge time was 1 minute and 30 seconds. Because Zhugan is passionate about men and women, and he has a perverted hobby of recording. So in his death dream, all he saw was smoke. If it wasn't for the death of his body, it would definitely make his blood swell. In the time set, Zhugan was rescued by his companions. There was no negative impact at all. Let everyone completely let go of the bottom line. And the next one is the unconscious man. He experienced death not for excitement, but for a higher medical pursuit and a witness to the truth. This time, his challenge time went up to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It's half the time of the ultimate death. The man who just entered the dream was like a light that could be moved quickly. He stayed in the Great River Mountain and experienced the scene of the whole world. But in this moment, a black girl suddenly appeared in his sight. And then it was a childhood memory. There was no continuation, because the man was with his companions. After almost 4 minutes of rescue, he was pulled back. And when the experiment was going on here, Huang Mao, the first one to do the experiment, suddenly found something terrible at home. A pile of feet was found on the white bedsheet. The man was beaten on the bed. He was humiliated and vomited. After that, this boy has been haunting around. After experiencing this tragedy again, Huang Mao could only hide in the corner to seal the wound. And when his companions asked him why he was injured, he said nothing. And only the second one who was in the same predicament did the death experiment. He was passionate about men and women. After getting the girls, he not only abandoned them cruelly, but also recorded them to satisfy his perverted hobbies. Then he enjoyed them leisurely. And after a while in the yin-yang realm, he could always see the girl who had been hurt by himself. He chased after himself all the time. The terrible hallucination made him mentally collapsed. Obviously, he wouldn't do such a shameful thing to his companions. And the man who had just finished the death experiment also came into contact with some terrible things. In the death dream, the black girl who had appeared reappeared in the tunnel again. And she was mercilessly mocking and scolding herself. Every word was cold. Although this state did not last long, when he returned to reality, the man immediately realized that this must be the aftermath of the death experiment. So he hurriedly rushed to the church to stop his companions from continuing their journey. But it was still too late. The girl's death experiment had already begun. The man knew that the relationship was bad, so he immediately stopped the experiment and began to rescue her. At that time, the girl's soul consciousness came to her childhood. When she was still a girl, she sneaked into a room that was strictly forbidden to enter, and her father couldn't face this result, so he shot himself to death. For many years, the girl always blamed herself for her father's death. Although the girl was successfully saved in the 5-minute limit, her father's nightmare still lingered. Every time she was alone, she could see her father. It seemed to be the terrible meaning of coming back for revenge. Even when the school was doing a clinical dissection experiment, her father's nightmare followed. 4 of the 5 people in the plan had a terrible sequelae after the death experiment. At this time, they had to talk to each other. The boy in the dream of Huang Mao was often bullied by her when he was young. The girl in the boy's dream was also bullied by her when she was young. The girl in the dream of Shou Zhugan was all broken by her. And the girl's father committed suicide because of her accident. All the horrors in the nightmare are sins or retribution, but the man who was also in trouble didn't give up. He knew the reason why the dissection was necessary, so he found the address of the black girl in the dream on the way to the school. Then he set off with Huang Mao, who didn't dare to be alone. Not long after, they came to a suburb. The little girl who was bullied by the man when she was young was also weak, and she had a happy family. After knowing the man's intention, she didn't refuse, but she didn't care about these past events, but chose to forgive. Thank you. Are you sure? At the same moment, dusk approached. Huang Mao, who was in the car, suddenly saw a black figure flashing in front of him. He quickly closed the window and shouted loudly, but what should have come still came. The red-clothed boy's eyes began to hurt, and Huang Mao could only resist, but he couldn't resist. At the critical moment, the man felt that he had stopped everything in time. But there was no red-clothed boy in the man's eyes. His eyes could only see Huang Mao hurting himself. After going back, the man told everyone his method. After he was forgiven by the black girl, the strange feeling of the nightmare completely disappeared. So getting forgiveness may be the only solution. Zhugan also agreed with this. because he was the first to break the curse. Not long ago, his girlfriend suddenly found out the little secret of his special hobby and chose to break up. After being deliberately destroyed by Zhugon, his nightmare also disappeared. The same thing happened again when the woman's retribution appeared that night. He didn't choose to escape or be afraid, but to face the root of the problem. After the change of mentality, the scene also changed. He saw that as a soldier's father, he was actually injecting poison. Maybe the father at that time chose to kill himself because he couldn't face his daughter who adored him. So the father's death was not the responsibility of the woman in the end. Many years later, the father and his daughter were together. In this moment, the dream of the woman turned into a beautiful dream. At that time, 3 of the 4 people had already resolved the knot in their hearts. Only the last yellow hair could not be released until his companions saw the boy's tombstone and found out the reason. It turned out that when the yellow hair and his companions were bullying the boy in red, he accidentally fell off the tree. Even if there was a dog, it was killed by both of them in the end. So the yellow hair wanted to get forgiveness for the child in reality without being able to tell the truth. But he still had one last way. The yellow hair didn't wait for his companions to react, but just withdrew. Finally, he stopped at the ruined church where everything was created. If you want to apologize to a dead person face to face, you must be a dead person first. So the only way for the yellow hair was to do another death experiment because he didn't want to implicate others again. So all the procedures this time had to be done by himself. Even if he knew that he had no companions to rescue him, he would die. When he went deep into that terrible dream again, the yellow hair found that his role was exchanged with the boy in red. At this time, he was suffering the representation of the boy in red being bullied. The yellow hair fell to the ground fiercely and completely stopped moving. At the same time, the male master and others also rushed to the church in time. But at this time, the yellow hair had entered a state of death for 10 minutes. They held the dead horse as if it was a bo-ma-i and went straight to death. All kinds of tricks were used. In the end, a miracle happened in 12 minutes, and the yellow hair in the same dream also woke up. At this time, the boy and the dog were standing in front of him. The yellow hair was not afraid to run away, but full of apology. And the boy in red didn't speak to him, but the smile was replaced by the expression. Although he didn't say he forgave him directly, maybe it was a smile of apology. After solving his dream, the yellow hair returned to reality safely. Everything was perfect at this moment.